Welcome to our Q&A, and especially if you're joining us for the first time. We're so happy. I know I keep saying we're so happy to have you, but it's true. Honestly, it is. It's true. Talk to a church leader that doesn't like new people coming, then they should not be doing what they're doing. So I'm really happy to have you, and I'm sure members of City Church too are. And so what we try to do here is to answer questions, general questions, live Q&A. You may not always find the answers that you like, or we may not always have the answers, but we try to make an attempt to answer questions about City Church, answer questions about the sermon, and answer questions about Christianity in general, okay? So we can receive those questions through WhatsApp, through the comment section in YouTube or Facebook. Received the question even via email just a few days ago in anticipation of this service. So yeah, just want to remind you, if you've not hit the subscribe button, you may want to consider for your first time, maybe waiting till the end to then consider. If you want to do us that blessing, and just subscribe now on YouTube or follow us on the platform you are watching through, would really appreciate that. Okay, so let me see. Are there any questions here I can't see any in YouTube. But I know, so let me go to the question that was sent via email, and it's from Olabisi Williams, and Olabisi references something in the book, in the Eternity Changes Everything. Olabisi has already read chapter 3, so I told you people that you'll be able to read this thing like that. Okay, now, it had to do with it was a reference to Exodus 33, verse 20, where the high priest entered the most holy place only once a year, and then only for a few minutes, and only after elaborate preparations. Okay. Then the question was, I think Olabisi is female, so I'm just going to use she, okay? I've always wondered about historical physical proof, to use that manner of speech, for some occurrences in the Bible. Is there any material you can recommend where I can see proof that these things happened on earth? Like in the instance above, the existence of the tabernacle, and what happened when, if people entered the most holy place unworthily. Like the story we hear of people being dragged out with ropes and all of that. Another example of such musing is, can one find some proof in history on the ark of Noah, the ark that Noah built, or the fact that a flood happened that wiped the earth, stuff like this. Hoping to hear your thoughts. All right, thank you, Olabisi. Interesting questions there. First thing you asked whether there's any material I can point you to. There are number I can even think. So if you are trying to find that historically, okay, let me walk back. All right. You do know, as most of us know, that in biblical times there were no video cameras. You couldn't record. This is not the way we prove history. So the way we prove history, obviously, is going to be, particularly today, in the science of archaeology, how you discover remnants of certain things, and the archaeological artifacts are then many times matched with textual evidence. All right, so maybe you would have had certain books, certain scrolls written, and they have told us about certain things, and then we are able to match it with certain things. So the archaeological artifacts are hugely important. Sometimes you don't even have to excavate a piece of land; it's just there. I'll give you an example. Recently, I was watching a documentary. You know, a lot of our treasures, our historical treasures here from Nigeria, you can't find them in a Nigerian museum. A lot of them are in museums around the world, in the West, for instance, the museums in New York and in London in particular. A lot of the Benin ones, after they came and invaded Benin, and they took a lot of those treasures. Now, what you find with a lot of the the bronze statues and all of those things of the Benin Kingdom was, they weren't just bronze statues. They were commemorating certain things. They were commemorating certain obas. They were commemorating certain wars. that they fought and all of those things. In other words, the history is read through those artifacts. And in many ancient kingdoms of the Hittites, there used to be kingdom of Hittites, kingdom of the Persians, all of these things. The way we know that they existed largely is by artifacts. Some of them have had to be excavated. You may find a certain coin. Recently, I know there was a signet coin a few years ago that had inscribed, I think, something about David there. And so when you then look at those things and you then say, okay, but there's stuff that has been written. You don't have to say whether they're religious texts or not, because a lot of religious texts, like the Bible, is also historical. Now, it's not just trying to give you any kind of history. The Bible is giving you redemptive history, but it's not saying that it's not giving you redemptive history of things that didn't happen. So I've often said, and it's true, the most written about figure in ancient history, just in terms of volume, is King David. Is King David. More than any other thing, talk about the wars of, is it Troy? The war of Troy, what was it called? Where you had the Trojan horse come through. The battle of, I forget, And that's written in, is it Homer's Iliad? I can't quite remember, an ancient text that you don't even have enough manuscripts of. And we actually believe that. And then we have some little artifacts here and there to be able to find relics of the past. And so there's a way you match those things. I have a book, it's called Evidence, if I can just, Evidence of the Bible, for the Bible. It's all about, okay, I know the camera people will not like this now that I've gone out. But this one is by Clive Anderson and Brian Edwards, and you just basically have a lot of things that are referred to, in the Bible, right? You find the archaeological proof for them. And so it's a very, very nice book you can have to help you with that. So these things exist. There are lots of things. Then you go into the Bible itself. Take, for instance, how the book of Luke, how Luke writes in the book of Acts, Paul's missionary journeys. And you just look at maps of ancient history and you're like, yeah, that happened. That had to have happened. The way he went through, talked about going to this place and that place and that place, and you can see how they're aligned. You saw the 7 churches in Asia Minor I referred to today. You saw a map in there, just saw how close they were. So you can say, okay, even though this happened 2,000 years ago, that's, Then you come to history that is even older than that. Now, that is a little bit more difficult because writing in our technology series, if you remember, I said that writing where you combine phonetic words actually was something that started to happen just about 100 years before the Exodus in Egypt. So it wasn't proliferated as in the way at the time of Paul, which is probably about 1,500 to 2,000 years after. So actually getting proof in the same way that you could get for Roman times and all of those things, it's not exactly the same. So you still have to look at some of the evidence that you see written from, because actually the Bible is one of the only few things that has reported written history of that time. So when I get to stuff like the Tabernacle, it just makes sense to say, okay, there was a Jewish people that eventually came around a certain period of time. This is the history that's been written about them. Or, okay, take the Tabernacle, you say, okay, how do we know? But Solomon's temple was definitely attested to. It was one of the 70 ancient wonders of the world, just in the same way that the temple of Artemis that I talked about was attested to, right? So if you can attest to Solomon's temple, to the temple of Artemis, you should be able to do that with Solomon's temple. And there's proof outside of the Bible for that. But Solomon's temple, the way the temple was set up and structured was modeled after the tabernacle that was given to Moses. If that was not a historical fact, then the foundation upon which the Solomonic temple was built now then becomes a problem, you see. This is the way historians reckon with history. It can't be the same way we do it in modern times. But it is credible. There are ways they go about these things. And so that's how you prove that. Final one I should say about Noah's Ark, and let's say the flood that wiped out the entire earth. Now, I want to say Genesis 1 to 11 is is, in terms of just history, is the most debated and contested part of the Bible, because that's even much more earlier. But I do want to say that you do find in other texts, other texts of the ancient Near East, of people who are not Jews, right, about a flood, about a worldwide flood. So it's not only in the Bible that it's spoken about. I think it's Sumerian texts, for instance, that talk about that. So it's not only the Bible. Now, it is, we can question whether or not, as it is being written, when it's talking about the world, it's talking about the world that they know, the known world. So for instance, in Romans chapter 1, I think verse 8, Paul talks about the faith of the Romans known to all the world. But world, in terms of in what Paul was thinking, he wasn't thinking about the Americas, for instance, that had not yet, we didn't know, most of the world didn't know much about that, where the native Indians, where the United States of America, where Canada are now. They didn't know that. So we're talking about the Roman world. And it's very possible that the flood that we're talking about was for a certain area. Maybe it didn't reach South America. There are people that take different views on that. So we can debate those things. But just suffice to say that what I was saying about how we can find out whether these things happen is when we start to investigate certain times in history, we have to go with the way historians go about that. There are things we can excavate archaeologically, and there's massive evidence for all the things that the Bible says, all the times that it refers to, some of the personalities that it refers to. And then the further back you go, you do depend on written history and things like that. So I hope that helps. Okay. Let me see. Is this? Yeah, I'm not sure whether this is a question. So, okay. Any? Let me check on YouTube now. Sorry, having to go through different apps is an issue. All right, Bemileke Anthony says, so I was listening to the book of Job and I couldn't help but wonder. So the devil and God just randomly chill and chit-chat? Seems like God is plotting with the enemy. Shouldn't the devil be running from God? Biblically, I think one of the things that happens is that many times our view of God, devil, heaven, hell, those things are formed already by ways we are taught, traditions and things like that. You know, Christians go to heaven, and so we are going to heaven, and then I don't know what's going to happen here on earth, but you know, there are just certain phrases that we use that we already bring to the biblical text, and many times what happens is that we force the biblical text to fit into our narrative. So like I say, heaven and hell. Whereas the Bible doesn't promise that our hope is going to heaven. As we've tried to show, that the Bible promises that our hope is a new heaven and a new earth. That is, this world actually restored. It says, heaven is the dwelling place for those who are waiting that hope when they die, right? But it's just like an intermediary place. But we've already assumed a lot of what the Bible teaches just from culture and the way it's been passed on, because simplicity helps you to pass on tradition. Simplicity of expressions helps you to pass on tradition. When we say God, we just say God, one God, one God, one God, one God. But we never really say, oh, when you get into the Bible, says, yeah, one God, but the Father is God, the Spirit is God, the Son is God. And we don't know how to then work. We just talk, well, there's God, He had a Son, Jesus Christ, and then there's this Holy Spirit that likes to talk to me. But we don't actually think about it in a Trinitarian way. In other words, what I'm saying is many times simplistic ways in which we've already embraced what we think the Bible is teaching, we encounter problems with them when we then get into biblical text and just read it. So, for instance, we'll say something like, it's not possible, it's impossible for Satan to come into the presence of God. Why? Why do we say that? When you read the book of Job, it's not saying that can't happen. Evidently. So we have to be careful with how we do that. Now, what's going on in the book of Job? I think there is a sense in which, of course, Satan is not in relationship with God. He is distant from God. But yet, God is sovereign over all of his creation. When I say over all of the creation, over anything that exists. And so, if God is going to have a dialogue with Satan, God has a dialogue with the Satan. It's that simple. Right? Now, what the book of Job, though, I think is telling us, we also want to be careful where sometimes things are given to us metaphorically to pass on a certain truth. They're not necessarily giving it to us in the way we view, how do I put it? We read the Bible too many times. We read the Bible too many times as modern people and not as ancient people. So in other words, we get into the book of Job and we're like, I already know there's something called the devil. I already know there's God. All right, so there was a time that the sons of God were gathered and Satan also came. Oh, so does God have regular meetings? Maybe God has a meeting and then Satan actually set an appointment to meet. Like God holds regular court and then Satan comes in. I'm not sure when an ancient person is reading that text, that's exactly what they are thinking. You see, we go in and we miss the point of it, which was that there is such a thing as suffering of the just. And the suffering of the just happens in such a way that the arch enemy of God, the embodiment of evil, can come against the people of God, and yet, when it comes against the people of God, he is not doing it outside of God's sovereignty. So now let me tell you a story about a man called Job, who actually certain things happened to Job. And in the spiritual sphere, what was actually going on is that Satan was the one who was going to attack Job, but he was not going to do it outside of God's sovereignty. So what you are meant to really pick out from that is this powerful embodiment of evil is not outside of the control of the sovereign God, even though he's attacking the people of that sovereign God. That's what you take. Second is, as James tells us, you have heard of the perseverance of Job. The call for Christians is, as we look at Job, is to persevere. Third is that Christians are not called to suffer in stoic ways, like don't say anything, because Job, which is some of the things that used to happen with Job, we read Job 1 and 2. Job did not sin. And then we read Job 42. Job had everything restored. We don't read what's in between. But what it shows us is that Christian suffering comes with sometimes discomfortable discussions with God. Job was lamenting. And lament, where we are complaining about our situation, is not necessarily a sign of unbelief. It's a sign of profound belief. It's a sign of, I'm coming to God to argue my case. I don't think that I deserve this, but I know that God has something better. But I can't understand this middle ground between the God who will restore all things, the God who will vindicate my unjust suffering, and the God who is allowing this to happen now. And so what that produces is lament before him, which is what Job does. But then it also shows the limits of human knowledge, so that when God eventually talks to Job, he says, my friend, where were you when I created the stars? This one that you're complaining, do you think you know all things? Where were you when I did this? Where were you when I did this? Well, Job gets the point. He's like, God. The things that God does is because of the things that God knows. And I don't know everything. And so that is why I was questioning what God does. But now, before I had heard you with the hearing of the ear, Job said, but now my eye sees you. And then at the end, it still shows us that ultimately, God will vindicate his people. That what Job got for his suffering, Job had better than what he ever had in the very beginning. So, I would say, if you take the book of Job and just read it like that encounter, just in the same way we are talking now, the same way we just write history about human beings, we may be missing out and we may be getting into details of stuff that even the ancients themselves never thought, I have to read this. See it as Satan is not outside of God's control. See it as, even when the people of God are attacked by Satan, it's never done outside of God's control. How that then, works out in terms of Was did Satan actually enter into the courts of heaven, if there is such a thing as courts of heaven, and come in and then have it? I'm not quite sure. I don't know whether we're meant to read all of those things literally in that sense, but we are meant to read them truly. That is, what is conveying there is actually true. You see what I mean? Hopefully that helps. Okay. Body by Hadiza. What's the rule about the covering of head or hair for women in church or during worship? Good morning to you too. Hair covering. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 11. I flip-flopped over this thing, by the way. I flip-flopped over it. Okay. 1 Corinthians 11. Paul says, I praise you for remembering me in everything and for holding to the traditions just as I passed them on to you. But I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ, head of every woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. So it's not, most of this, the tradition I've seen, is not just on women, Hadiza. It is also men. Men, it's saying that the men should not have their own head covered. It's saying, then it now talks about women, but every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It is the same as having her head shaved. For if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. But if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, then she should cover her head. A man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but the woman is the glory of man. For man did not come from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. It is for this reason that a woman ought to have authority over her own head, because of the angels. All right. That's where it is. That's the deal. It's there. I say I flip-flop. So I started my Christian journey with thinking, all these religious people telling women to cover their head, and men coming in and you say you have to remove your head because you're in church. Well, what's all that? What does that achieve? What does that achieve? And then I got more serious with the Bible. And then I read this. And I'm like, when people say, hey, what's even the reason? What's the reason? I'm like, well, have you read the text? It's not that the text didn't give reason. It says, this is the reason. So, whilst you are coming against religious people and all of that, do you want to be serious with the Bible? So, I would like to hear why you think that they shouldn't, because it's clear in the Bible there. And this, I think we all want to be very careful sometimes how we, quote-unquote, quickly dismiss religious people. Every time, yes, we may have experienced bad things in our Christian walk with God. We may have experienced bad things in our Christian walk with God, but the abuse of a thing or the misuse of a thing doesn't invalidate its proper use. The abuse or the misuse of a particular thing doesn't, or a particular instruction, doesn't invalidate its proper use. So before you oppose something, don't just say, well, I don't think it's true. What then do you say to the text? I think that this text, at least, it gives a proper basis for the argument of that. And there are people, serious Christians who are not religious Christians, that actually think that believe this is true. And I think they have a very good case here. And that's why I changed my view at that time, right? And I even persuaded some people to change their view. Now, I flip-flopped. I now changed my own view back to where I don't think it is there. And some of the people that I persuaded haven't changed their minds. And it's fair game. And I want to say in City Church, if you are the kind of person that believes that you should cover your hair as a woman according to your conscience, please, we'll welcome you. We'll welcome you to do that and stick to your convictions about it. If you're the kind of guy that feels that when you come in, you want to remove your baseball cap, just make sure you don't have dandruff on your hair, and then we will permit you to also do whatever you want. I'm joking. But don't have dandruff on your hair too now. Okay, but why did I change my view? I think So when I think about something like when Paul gives instruction that we should give each other, we should greet each other with a holy kiss. I think what Paul is doing is that he is trying to tell us to express certain principles, certain eternal principles using particular cultural norms. Certain eternal principles using certain particular cultural norms. So when it says greet each other with holy kiss, in that region, right, everybody kissed each other like that. Till today, in that region, right? Have you met an Arab man? They're always kissing. Femi Akinware, some of you that know who that is in church, comes and it's even the weirdest thing. Imagine Femi Akinware trying to, oh God. I mean, it's not our particular cultural norm. But God is saying, Femi, Oshunui, love Femi Akinware. He's saying, don't just love him, just say, I love you. Like, love him affectionately. So what is your own particular cultural norm that is well accepted around you people in your day and time? Express it. Now here, it's the same thing. It's trying to convey a certain, it's talking about the structures that hold a society together, and it starts with the home, right? It starts with the home. He eventually relates it to the church, but then he said this is also built on a larger one, which is God, and then the incarnate man God, right? So Christ, church, God, Christ, church, and so he's saying these things are really important. Now he's saying if you don't think that it's important, and so the cultural norm to then signify this authority for the woman was a symbolic gesture, was to cover her head. Now, one of the reasons why I know that I don't think Femi Akinware is sending me a terrible emoji with red lips now. Femi, it's no please speak to your husband. All right. Now, one of the reasons why I know this it can't be applied fully is because he says you two think about it. It says that it is the same as having her head shaved. For if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. But it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or head shaved, then she should cover her head. In other words, later he even talks about a man, it's a shame for a man to grow his hair long. If you look at African women, generally, African women's hair doesn't always, okay, forget the wigs. We know a lot of you people whose hair is long and everything. We know it's not your hair, right? We know it's not your hair. African women, particularly, not all, but the vast majority of African women struggle with their hair, growing very much. And so it's not a disgrace for them. God didn't give them the hair. It's not a disgrace for a woman to have short hair in this place. In Paul's time, with the kind of ethnicity that they had, women's hair just naturally grew. And so it was the norm for a woman to have her hair long. And so he was saying, if it was cut off, you are not going to be like every other woman. So he took what was a cultural norm that they all understood to then explain this thing. And so then the covering of the hair then became a sign of, okay, you always have long hair. Maybe it's a sign of, if you just put it down there, it's a sign of just autonomous freedom and whatever in this society. But if you cover it, we know that you have a certain authority over you. So I'm saying that I don't think, now, I do think, for instance, to know that a woman is married, we have a ring. We have a ring. To know that a woman submits to her husband in her home, we have a ring. We know, okay, this woman is married. And I'm not saying that 150 years from now, the ring will still be this signal. So the principle of respecting the God-given authority structures in the home can be expressed in different ways now. So that's how I think we leave this thing out. So that's why I changed my view on it, right? I know some people who still disagree with that they look at this text and they'll give certain reasons for it. I've not been persuaded by that, but I'll say, whichever view we hold, let's try not to look down on one another. Okay? And whichever view you hold, try to actually try to justify it from the Bible, or try to understand where the other person is really coming from. All right? Now, I'm not saying this particularly to you, I'm speaking to everybody. All right. Okay. Let us go. Is there another one? Okay. Yeah. Bola Adebola Alojolu says, how do I relate the fact that God does not change, with many places in the Bible where God changes his mind, especially as a Christian in my everyday relationship with God? All right, I want to say a huge word here that I'm sure I've used before in church. It's the word anthropomorphism. 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 You want to say it together? Should we say it together? Anthropomorphism. All right. Why is that word important? It's because anthropos is Greek for humanity, man. And then we know what morphing is, right? It's sort of your morphism is how you change. Now look at it this way. You know how many of us like to carry our babies and do? A baby is 3 months old. What do we do with baby? Carry. You know, all of that nonsense. We feel like we are saying something to them. What are we doing? We are trying to morph into being like baby so that the baby will understand us. Now, it's absolutely silly because the baby doesn't understand you. But that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to morph. We're trying to condescend to how the baby can understand, how we think the baby understands and communicates, so that we can better relate with that baby. It's not that we cannot communicate at a more complex level. We can. But for the sake of relatability with one who is lower than us in terms of their cognitive factors, we start to try to be like them. So imagine a God who is eternal, that is, doesn't dwell in time and space. Imagine that. You cannot imagine it. You cannot. You know why? The way our brains are structured, the way we've always thought, we cannot not think within time and space. But what we do know is that God is beyond time and space. We just know that for a fact, but we can't imagine exactly fully what that is. Then, if he's beyond time and space, that means he's always been. He's eternal. He has no age. Okay, so a formless, every human being that we know, every creature that we know has form. That is, I occupy, as I'm sitting here, I'm occupying this space, I'm not occupying that space. So you can say that's where Femi is. And if you could see the other people around me, you say that's where Lighton is, that's where Victoria is, that's where Tomiwa is. Okay. Because we occupy a particular space. Now all of a sudden, this God doesn't occupy any space. This God is eternal. He has no age. He has no whatever. How do you relate with him? The only way you can relate with him is if he comes down, condescends, and relates with you. Unless he morphs in a way like into our humanity, at least to speak to us in the way humans understand, we will not be able to understand him. And so that is where you get some of these anthropomorphic statements like, you know, the right hand of the Lord, right? He's seated on the right hand of God, right? He breathed into the nostril the breath of life, like God breathes, right? Uphold us with your mighty arms. Give ears to my words, O Lord, like God has an ear. God changed his mind. He regretted him that he made. When he says God, he regrets that God regretted, making humanity because of the sin that was multiplied on the earth in Genesis chapter 6. He's basically just trying to convey to you his deep feelings and his positions on sin. Not that he did not know that humanity would sin and all of those things, because he's eternal. Known to God are all his ways from the foundation of the world. You see. So that is how we reconcile it. That the reconciliation is for the purpose of his disclosure to us, so that we can actually understand and we can follow instruction. And the apex of God's anthropomorphism is that God became a human being. He actually, literally, it's not just that he spoke in ways humans can understand. He became a human being, and that's why John can then say, what our eyes have seen, what our our ears have heard, what our hands have handled of the word of life. We've held God. We've held God. The only reason you could hold God is because God then could occupy space and time. And that is we find in the person of Jesus Christ. Okay? Yona says she sent a question via WhatsApp. Has it been sent to me? Okay. This one, this one is long, and I can already see the word Salah there. And I don't want to do Salah meat question again. All right. Good morning. It's Yona here. It's reflecting on the important teaching on Salah meat and joining in non-Christian demonic worship. Please, can you comment on the celebration of Christmas? Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. On the celebration of Christmas and Easter, even us calling the most central event in Christianity by a completely pagan name is an issue that I would like you to please address. Is it right for Christians to dismiss the pagan origins and persistent pagan practice of Christmas and Easter and continue to practice these things? These include the names of the festivals, Easter, to the modes of worship including trees, eggs, rabbits, gift-giving, stocking filling, etc. I ask this because these pagan religions are still being practiced. I had a colleague who would invite me to winter solstice celebrations, complete with forest trek worship services. Forest trek worship services. That's deep. I guess my question is, are we wrongly disposed to excusing demonic practice influences that have been co-opted into Christianity? All right, wonderful. I was scared that we went to go down Salamit again. First of all, I want to say that there's a difference between this and, let's say, practicing Salah, because, like eating Salamit, because with eating Salamit, what is happening is you are practicing, you're engaging in worship activities of a known religion, and it is the activity you're engaging in is as expressed by that religion. It's as expressed by that religion. It's not, oh, these were practices of a particular religion, and then it's been co-opted, it's been taken over, and then it's been diluted such that it resembles nothing of what that religion actually specifies it to be. So these are two materially different things, right? And so if, for instance, you are in some kind of, your friend called you, she says, okay, I'm an ancient Celt, and this is our Celtic religion, and this is our winter solstice, and this whatever, can you walk with us? Let's go to the East Islands. Let's, where we go to Stonehenge, we go and we go around the stuff and we say certain things. My friend, what are you doing there? That, for me, is akin to practicing the Salah thing. Now, how about what we call the Christianization of certain practices from other religions? This is a complicated matter, I have to say. You see, one of the strengths, I've said this many times, but I'll say it again. If you check the various established religions of the world, you always see they're concentrated in one or at most two areas in the world. So take Islam, for instance. It's basically the Middle East, Northern Africa, and Southeast Asia, all right? Southeast Asia. It's not dominant anywhere else. It's very, very limited. All right? If you take Hinduism, just India. If you take Buddhism, right, Tibet, a certain part of China. If you take Shintoism, Japan. If you take Judaism, Israel, some parts of America, but even that, it's not. There are Jewish people there, but you don't really do Orthodox Judaism. Take Christianity, everywhere, 20-something% here, 20-something% here, 20-something% here, everything. Why? Because the genius of Christianity, especially when you read Ephesians 2 or John chapter 12, about he has made, in fact, me and Tofumi have been going through the book of Acts for his night reading, and we're at the point of Acts chapter 15. And when we got to the point when some of those Judaizers said, oh, for you to be a Christian, you must, yes, believe in Jesus Christ, but you must also, that's talking to the Gentiles, that you must also keep the laws of Moses. And when I read that, two of them were like, no, we don't have to do that. We don't, I'm like, yeah, that's my boy. So we don't have to do that. We just have to believe in Jesus Christ. This is the genius of Christianity. He was saying that the Jews can continue to be ethnically Jews. They can still keep some of their Jewish practices because you can remove the religious elements from it and it's just part of what they are culturally. Right? And yet, they know that there are certain things in their Judaism they can't do because now they are a new man in Christ. Just as the Gentiles don't have to do all of those things, the Gentiles can actually continue being cultural Gentiles, do not participate in things that are explicitly religious, and keep to certain commandments of Christ. But what he's saying is that while the Jews and Gentiles are the same in Christ, the expressions of their Christianity, which will have certain cores, would also be somewhat culturally different. That was the genius of Christianity. And that was what made it able to go throughout the world. The Bible that is our sacred text, nobody says you must only read it in Hebrew and Greek, that you mustn't translate it. It can be translated to your other language. Nobody says this is the way you have to dress. Nobody says that this is the time or everybody everywhere must pray around this time or break their fast around this time. It doesn't say any of those things. Now, it's not just any kind of liberty. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9, but I am the Lord's slave. So there are commandments to keep. And even in Acts chapter 15, it then says, yeah, but don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So it's not any just kind of libertarianism, I'm free to do what I want. No. But it's saying how it the things that you demand from it are not necessarily just based on your ethnicity. And that's why I was able to go through. So when it was now spreading to many parts of the world, one of the issues was, all right, there's this established religion here. I can't remember who I was talking with recently, but it was about even words that we use. Maybe it was even this Q&A. There's this established religion here. This theological word that we use in our own place, these people have how do I translate it? How do I translate this word in a way they can understand? Because language comes from culture, and culture is also steeped in the cultural religions. And so there's that mix, and it's like, I'm trying to bring in a new religion here, and yet it's still going to embed itself in this culture. How do we do that? Oh, these people believe that because they have winter, and then they have summer, spring and summer, and then, winter, spring, summer, autumn, and that. Do you know there is a shape of the gospel there? That Jesus at winter goes, goes to die at winter, but then by the time spring comes, it's rising, it's resurrecting. There's something there. Are there ways we can use the church calendar to then, if you like, make this thing sort of familiar to these people, but we subvert it? So you take some of these folk religions that you had, particularly in the British Isles and some of these places, the Celtic regions. And it's like, we need to go into these regions and remove these idolatrous behaviors. How do we do that without it seeming like it's just war against the people? We subvert it. And so we take the core elements out of the religion there and we Christianize it. So that it is, their religion basically has no power again. And we make certain kinds of connections there, and saying, "Oh, you think this son was the son that you talked about? No, but the real son is this one, and he is not the kind of son that you think in your own religion. He's not the son as a lesser god. He is actually the true God." So basically, we take the cultural forms that people they recognize, but then we subvert it by infusing it with Christian theology. And I think when that happens, you render them powerless. So now, if you then say, okay, Easter, now I have to say, some people, I know some Christians that don't use the word Easter for what you say, they just say resurrection day. That's fine. But I would say, for instance, even the word we use, Christian appears twice in the Bible. Twice. Then some people say we shouldn't be calling ourselves Christians because disciple, I know some people that say, no, I'm a disciple of Christ. I'm not going to use Christian because Christian only appears twice in the Bible. Some say I'm a disciple of Christ. There's even a whole church movement. They call themselves disciples of Christ. There's some people who say, I'm a follower of Christ. Because when you just say Christian, it doesn't show that you have to follow the way of Christ. And I'm like, well, choose whichever one you want. The thing about Christian is, I know it appears twice in the Bible, but it's just a convenient term that God in His sovereignty has allowed to be the most popularly used one. So I'm just going to use it. And so when I come to things like Christmas or Easter, I'm like, I'm going to preach the gospel in a way that I've never preached. Well, I should always preach the gospel well. But like, this is an opportunity that God in His sovereignty has allowed that most of the nations of the world actually give as a public holiday. Right? They understand it more as Easter. Yes, we can quibble on the name and all of those things. But on that Easter day, you know what you do? You preach the gospel well, you dish it all out. Okay, Christmas tree. You know, if I have a Christmas tree, it doesn't mean I'm taking a Christmas walk. Oh. You know, there's a difference between having a Christmas tree, sacrificing a Christmas tree, the stocking filling. Again, many of these things, they've been so rendered, yes, they symbolically represent what those things were before, but they've been so rendered powerless because the core of the religion has been taken away. You know what? One of the things I always say about legalism. What's legalism? Legalism is not Christianity. Legalism is another religion. It has Christian forms, but it's no longer Christianity. Why? Because the core of Christianity is the gospel, and legalism gives you commandment without the gospel. And so at that point, you no longer have Christianity, you have another religion. And with many of these religions and the way they've been symbolized in Christmas, Easter, and all of that, we have emptied them of their core teachings, their core power. We've emptied them of that. So what we are left is with the forms. And in that regard, they are really powerless. Now, I do understand if some people still have conscionable problems with that. And I'll say, this is a Romans 14 kind of issue. Let's not argue too much about it. Like, we'll be united. If it makes you, if you feel more comfortable not actually referring to the word Easter, not having a Christmas tree, not having Easter egg chases, I would say, please follow your conscience on that issue. But all I would just say is that let's be careful to not make it a primary issue, because I don't think it is a primary issue. And so that's what I'll say on that. Okay. Olumide, the things God, okay, that you're just quoting. Thank you, Pastor Femi. I didn't go. Oh, Yona. Okay, Yona said she didn't go for the she didn't go for the walk. Thank God you did not go. Maybe we won't have you here again. I think that was the last question. Right? No other question. Fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you all for your questions. Invite people for our service, for our next service, right? Use the links. The sermon will go up soon, so that if you don't want to send them a 2-hour plus whatever, just send them the sermon. You can use that to share. It will go up on YouTube very soon. It will be on SoundCloud and all that. You can use that to share with people, okay? But until then, until next week, looking forward to next week's service again. Try and stay intimate with God, and the Lord bless you.